And the privilege of the chair, I would like to have a moment of silence in memorial of Brooks Patterson. Thank you. Roll call.
Markham. Here. Middleton.
Here.
Quarles. McGillivray.
Here.
Howell. Miller.
Absence with notice.
Notice. Long.
Here.
Cowell. Zach.
Here.
We have a quorum.
With that, the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I need a motion to approve the minutes from July 31st, 2019.
I'll move it.
Commissioner McGillivray, supported by Commissioner Middleton. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? Motion carries. I need a motion for approval of the agenda.
Gee, I don't know, it's kind of complicated.
I'll second.
Middleton and
I'll second.
We are, I do need to amend
Oh,
the
yeah.
agenda, and without the budget hearings, will you amend?
Oh, yes,
I'll
yes,
support.
that's part of my.
Okay. So, any discussion on that? And just an explanation is, given what's going on around us, we decided that we should suspend budget hearings this week, and next week we were scheduled on the day of the funeral, and we will reconvene shortly thereafter. We're gonna meet and set a new schedule, so, as soon as we can. Okay, any other discussion on the agenda? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposition? Motion carries. Do I have any public comment? Seeing none, public comment is closed. Communications, do I have a motion to, Commissioner Markham with McGillivray seconding that. Any discussion on communications? Any questions, any discussion? Okay, seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Motion carries. First item, Sheriff's Office, use of forfeited funds.
I'll move it.
Middleton moved it with McGillivray supporting.
Good morning. You all know Gaia and Under Sheriff Mike McCabe from the Sheriff's Office. We're asking today for you to approve the use of forfeiture funds. As you know, we come to you once a year, asking to spend from the forfeiture fund on items that enhance law enforcement per the state statute. This passed Public Safety and Social Justice Committee unanimously yesterday. And I'll quickly go over the items that are on there, and then I have, anybody has any specific questions, I have the experts over here that can answer them. For the aviation unit, we're gonna upgrade the mapping system on both units, on Air 2. Emergency locator transmitters, that's a requirement from the FAA. Factory current flight training, that's where every year we have to have our pilots go through required FAA training. SWAT equipment, a new SWAT equipment truck that will replace the truck from 2003 that's on its last legs. Tactical sights and holsters, and a pull camera. And a pull camera is used basically in barricaded gunman situations, things like that, where we can reach the pole out with a camera and look in and not have to put anybody at risk. For the dive team, dark water vision system. Many times our divers go into the water and they can see about this far in front of them because of the mud and the lakes in Oakland County. OTS communications box, which allows them to communicate in the water to above the water. Underwater metal detector, that's self-explanatory. And then $3,000 donation to Crime Stoppers. They've been very helpful to us. in solving crimes, so we normally don't do that kind of thing, but the sheriff felt, given the relationship we've had with them and the number of crimes they've helped us where they pay out awards, we decided to give them a $3,000 donation. And then specialized deputy training, the vast majority of that will be used for the SWAT team going up to Camp Grayling for their annual training. And if there's any specific questions, we're happy to answer them.
Do we have any questions? Commissioner Markham?
I have a comment / question about, and I asked it in a meeting last week, about our firearms auction.
Oh, we canceled that.
Well, I
given
know
it's
we
money.
did, and I didn't even realize we did firearms auctions until we were reviewing, I think, the auction department last week. So I just wanna put out there, I know we make money doing that, but I really wonder if in this day and age, Oakland County should be in the business of putting weapons back on the street.
We understand,
I'd like us to
yeah.
have that conversation.
We understand your concern, and we're gonna have an internal discussion on that now. It's not a whole lot of money, but in the past, we used to take those firearms to the state police, and then they would sell them and or destroy them. So, at the time, several years ago, it was felt, well, rather than them get the revenue, we would get the revenue. But the sheriff and I had a discussion about this, and we'll continue to have a discussion about it. So your point is taken, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Other questions? I have one. How much is left in the forfeiture fund?
After this expenditure, about 250.
About there, 300,
Okay,
yeah, it was 700,
4 from 7.
yeah,
okay,
300.
it's there, yeah.
300,000
300
roughly.
something, 302,
Yeah,
302.
I know. Any other questions? Seeing none, let's call the roll.
Markham,
Yes.
Middleton,
Yes.
McGilvray,
Yes.
Miller, Long,
Yes,
Cowell. Yes. Zach,
Yes, motion carries.
Thank you very much.
Next item, which is the radio. Presentation, updated financial information on radio communication system memorandum dated July 29, 2019. This is informational, receive and file. Do I have a motion to receive and file? Commissioner Colwell with Long supporting. And thank you, Mr. Dado, for coming and presenting this. I thought this was an important issue relating to budget and also operations, so thank you for coming.
Yeah, Bob Dado, Deputy County Executive, Oakland. I wanted to give the Finance Committee, and yesterday I was at the Econ Committee to talk about the radio matter. About a week and a half ago, and after having spent a fair amount of time dealing with the PFN thing and the EZNet, which I'll discuss in a second, I had called a meeting of a number of folks on the radio implementation project, as well as the PFN folks. PFN is our contractor here for EZNet. EZNet is communications between the telephone companies and the dispatch centers that carries information such as location of the address. It was installed as part of the 911 system using copper, if you will, back in 1963. Before that point in time, there was no 911 service. And copper is a fine communication tool for voice, but doesn't carry data well, or at all. And in today's environment, we have converted to EZNet which is fiber, which for the very purpose of being able to transmit data. Pictures, if you will, is data. Streaming video of an event out there is data on your iPhone. And to that end, it allows us here to provide information from the field, from citizens, if you will, to the dispatch center as the event's full, even before there's people dispatched to the event. Long and short here is that we launched that effort, and the arrangement was that we selected PFN for a competitively bid arrangement, so we selected them through a bid opportunity. The PFN arrangement was is that the county indicated that it would pay the bills for PFN, both the capital and operating needs. Except that the state has stepped into the foray with the ability of providing a reimbursement to PFN, and as such, we pay the net of whatever they don't pay. And the earlier analyses that we had indicated that the state had improved the collections through some legislation last winter of 2018 on the reimbursement portion because the money was running dry at the time. The long and short here is that we have waited for literally a year and a half for the state to take some action on reimbursing the county for its EZNet efforts. And that created a huge problem for me in determining how much we might have to borrow. Because the EZNet contract that we have with PFN is that in the first year we owe them $3.4 million, and the years thereafter 2.7. The 2.7 is for operations. The difference between 3.4 and 2.7 was some capital, plus the operations. Well, that's a sizable amount, and that amount distorted my ability to identify how much the cost would be for the radio communication system, because that could be paid out of the operating surcharges. Well, the prior analyses that I've done on the cost and funding models have taken the what I guess I'd call bookends. I assumed in one bookend that we would receive 100% of the funding from the state, and we wouldn't have to put any money forward for the EZNet project. On the other end, I assumed that we would have zero reimbursement from the state, and the county would have to fund the entire amount for PFN. I suggested at the time that it wasn't going to be the bookends, but it was going to be something in the middle. I was quite surprised when the PFN controller, who we met with about a week and a half ago, came in and said, and it was on a Thursday, came in and said, well, geez, just 2 days ago, the Michigan Public Services Commission took action. Now, we weren't notified. We weren't there, so we had no knowledge of that effort. And the approach that they took, surprisingly enough, is that of the capital piece of the 3.4 in the first year, we received about $300,000 of that reimbursement. So we'd have to come up with about $400,000 ourselves. That's fine. You always ask for a little bit more than what may be realistic, and they came back with a $300,000 reimbursement. We have to eat $400,000. On the operating charge, which would be 2.7 to operate the system to the 20 PSAPs that we have in the county, that was $2.7 million that we owed PFN, plus whatever the state would pay. And the state is going to pay all but $80,000 a year. Our cost of operating the system is $80,000 a year. The rest is going to be paid through the state to PFN directly. That is, well above what I ever expected to receive from the state. I mean, way greater than I expected. If for no other reason than the state has chided us constantly on the number of PSAPs that we have, and the PSAPs drive the amount of costs that they would have to reimburse. So I was never expecting them to come forward with as much money as they did in the recovery of that effort. Now, what does that mean? It revises the model quite substantially, obviously, and the amount we would have to borrow. What I have done here is I've taken the earlier models, and virtually all of the prior cost information, with the exception of the EZNet, remains unchanged from the earlier models. That was pretty well fixed by contract, either with Motorola or our estimates of things outside of the Motorola contract. The dollar amount on line, item, if you refer to the package, if you will. Item number 1 is where I've corrected for the cost of the EZNet. And you could see the $400,000 in the distribution, and I think that'll be going out sometime very shortly. In the fiscal year ended September 30th, 2019. The operations here going forward is about $80,000 a year. And to that end, that's what we're going to have to pay for the EZNet. In the past, on the full amount of that effort, it was sizable. Now, that frees up a fair amount of dollars for us that can be driven into the actual radio communication project, capital project, if you will. What is the impact? The next impact down is, if you will, my projection on what we're going to have to borrow through bonds. Now, that had, even on the bookends, on the two, on the effort, my low end was 12,000 and my high end was 14 million. I keep jumping at, between GLEWA and, which is in hundreds of millions, and the county, which is in thousands, and, it just, where am I today? Long and short here is on the two ends. In the past, you've seen 12 million where I expected full funding from the state, and, if you will, 25 million if we did not get anything from the state. Now, the reason why it's about 14 million, and that number is still subject to debate going forward, and before you actually go out to approve a bond issue, I would recommend the board update this analysis, at the time you're going to have to do this, and this is sometime probably in the winter of 2020. Right now, my best projections are 14 million. Now, one of the problems I had was I was hoping to actually ask MCFI, our current financial advisor, to do the calculations on how much interest we would pay on that debt. And quite frankly, unfortunately, the chair of the board has indicated that he intends on putting out the FA financial advisor proposal for bid, and MCFI was then precluded from providing us the information to solidify my numbers on the projections on the debt service. So those numbers are based on earlier information that I'd received from MCFI, and those are based on those numbers. Now, in the past, I had, because of the need for cash flow, I had deferred the payment of principal for 3 years during the implementation project. I've accelerated the payment of the interest, now that, and principal, to starting in 2022. Now, what that is going to do is probably improve your bond rating, not your bond rating, but your interest rate that you actually borrow at by some amount. I don't know how much. Would have liked to have had an opportunity to talk to the FA on that one. As well as the bond issuance costs, they would have also provided me more accurate projections on that bond issuance costs. But those are placeholders at the moment. That may change a bit. The next item that is in there is that in your previous analysis, I had $1.6 million in 2021 and $1.6 million coming out of the general fund for 21 and 22. And that, by the way, is in your budget recommendations today. So it's in your, what we had given the board to consider going forward. Because at the time, that was the information I had available for this project. The amount that we're actually going to need in that effort from the general fund contribution, which was within the 1.6 and explained in my memos, is still going to be required of you to fund. And that is, if you will, the Children's Village radio system and the jail portable radios that would be in the jail. neither one of those two activities or functions are permissible underneath the operating surcharge. And as a result, even if we spent it and somebody audited us, it would be determined to be ineligible. So that has to be funded by, those capital costs have to be funded by the general fund. And that's pretty clear cut in the state statutes. The dollar amount there is $200,000 for Children's Village. They will actually go on a separate system. They will be on a UHF Motorola system, which will be connected to the dispatch function. So if they have an event that they need to call, dispatch on, they can do that rapidly. So that shouldn't be a problem. Interestingly enough, the Children's Village, and I guess we never really seemed to realize it until we got down into this particular project. Even though they had 75 radios of perhaps maybe 5,500 radios out there, they represented 8% of our traffic on the entire system, which we couldn't, which we shouldn't have tolerated before, but we can't tolerate going forward. They need to come off the system if for no other reason than that, and put on a separate system for their internal communications within the Children's Village complex. And that will help with capacity issues on our overall law enforcement public safety radio system. So they've got to come off. They'll go on a UHF system, and to that end, they'll be on their own radio system, but able to contact dispatch in the event of a 911 emergency. The jail, I don't think they'd have to contact the dispatch function. If they can't handle it in the jail, then I guess we got bigger problems anyway. You can do that, can't you, Mike? Great. The last item here that changed is just about the time I was doing this effort, T-Mobile and Sprint announced that they're merging. And it's been accepted by the federal government. So they're ultimately going to get together. What does that mean? That T-Mobile has no antennas up on our site right now, but Sprint does. They have a number of antennas. Ultimately, T-Mobile and Sprint will do a radio, their cell phone coverage, determine which one of the cell phone coverage that overlap, they can get rid of in terms of an antenna. So I expect to lose some antenna revenue from that consolidation from Sprint if Sprint antennas are taken off the site. As previously explained, 5G is going to cost us radio antennas in the future anyway, as 5G comes into the forefront in 21 and 22. So how much of that is going to have to be reviewed at the time. The long and short here is that this provides us, a considerably better cash flow than we had projected previously. But even with that effort, I have projected a need in 2028, and this is entirely up to the county executive and the board at the time, to start setting aside some of the money, and I've got $5 million, that's a placeholder as well, arising from the cash flow improvement arising from the OPEB bonds never having to be paid at that point going forward. So we'll have a $35 million cash flow in 2028 based on our OPEB that we did in 2007. Long and short here is I've set aside $5 million a year for money to be included in the radio communication fund to replace the system we're about to implement in order to minimize how much you'd have to borrow going forward. However, the board and county executive at the time decides on that issue is theirs, but my recommendation is you would wind up starting to set money aside to do that. How much that would be, I don't know where the technology is going to be in 15, 20 years, but I do know that ultimately this system that we're putting in place has a life expectancy of about 15 to 20 years, which is about what we got out of the current system. Now, the last item that I have is that the letter of transmittal recommends that we extend the PFN contract We are getting a proposal, the contract ends at 12/31/2022. We're getting a proposal from PFN to extend it for another 5 years. PFN right now has found a very niche industry in providing the EZNet type services to 81 and a half counties in Michigan. 81 and a half because Wayne County is in 4 districts and they have captured 2 of those districts. The other 2 haven't made a selection. The only other county which has not moved to an EZNet arrangement happens to be our county to the east, Macomb County. They're on copper still. And to that end, because they have the preponderance of the network that could be used to contact and communicate to other public safety agencies in and around the state, it made sense to at least get a proposal from them and consider whether or not we wanted to lock them up for a longer period of time than through 2022. That certainly is a board decision ultimately, because extending the contract beyond 2022 goes outside of the current purchasing policies and would need a board resolution to do so. So that is just an option for the board to consider going forward, that we have taken the initiative on.
My son's medicine, sorry, I'm hurting.
Okay, do.
I always shut everything, I have to do it this every 6 hours, I forget.
Okay, well, obviously you took the last one at 4 AM,
Yeah.
which is nuts.
I woke up at 4 AM.
4 AM, 4 o'clock comes once a day. That is pretty much what I wanted to communicate to the committee. And if you have any questions on this effort, I just think that it made this project far more doable when we were successful in having the reimbursement from the state.
Okay, I have Commissioner Middleton, then McGilvray.
Yeah, with the Macomb County situation, former Commissioner Dwyer, would he be involved in that? Wouldn't he be involved in?
Well, he's the commissioner of the city of Warren, which is just one of one system, one.
But a big part of Macomb County is.
Yeah, actually, he's probably, I think in terms of outside of the sheriff, I think that he has the most, law officers of any of our Clemens communities.
Yeah, so, okay. The other thing is, on that 5 million, that's basically depreciation, isn't it? You take
No.
take the total value and set up a depreciation chart and set that aside?
Well, remember that what we were doing here up until now is that we were setting money aside for some period of time on the current system. And if you look down on that analysis, right now as of March 31st, the current information that I had at the time, we had almost $29 million in cash, or we actually, about $29 million in liquid assets. The receivable from the accounts receivable is from the telecoms that we would get in the first week or two after the natural calendar quarter. So we actually received about $29 million and set aside that amount to minimize what we would have to spend today. If I hadn't done that, or if we hadn't done that as a team, what I'd be asking for would be 29 million plus 14 in bonds. And to that end, I think that this has given us a very good jump towards solving the problem that we're having today with the system.
Okay, that's all.
Commissioner McGilvray.
Thank you. As I remember in your first presentation, that we were going to leave something out of this program, and it is, if I'm not mistaken, it was firefighters' handheld radios?
No, that's not, well, let me answer that question. When we put out the RFP for the Motorola system, we asked for essentially virtually every function they had available, including the logging equipment, that would be at locals, for recording the voice communication and data communication that would be coming in. And to that end, having a standardized product that we would maintain. That logging equipment turned out to be about $7 or $8 million to replace it. And we said, well, you know, at the time, we had no opportunity to deal with that issue because we were well over budget on any of this effort. The second piece that came about in the most recent set of discussions was what is essentially called an alerting system. We asked for that information from Motorola as well. Motorola came back, and an alerting system would be for the fire halls, as I understand it, for things such as turning on lights, waking firemen up in the middle of the night to tell them they've got a little problem, you know, turning off coffee pots, sending data pertaining to the nature of the event that they're going to, whether it's a medical or whether it's a fire, you know, how bad it is, any other information concerning that effort. Perhaps if you're going into a commercial environment, whether they have toxic materials that they're entering into, which then becomes a hazmat situation and is far more dangerous to the firefighters than, you know, just a regular house fire. And that information is largely data. It's not voice communication. And this system that we're talking about here today is voice communication. The data would be coming in from the Clemis side of the shop, you know, which would be the information that's in the Clemis files, if you will. Now, the costs that we got back from Motorola was, and this is for 104 fire halls, was somewhere in the order of about $7 million just for the software and the implementation project. But that's not the entire cost. Once they told us $7 million, we said, well, just like the logging equipment, we can't move forward with this effort. We don't have it in the operating budget. We never pursued it further beyond that effort to determine exactly which fire departments would want to have this system of the 104 fire halls and which ones would not. We also did not pursue a significant cost component of that effort, which is wiring the fire halls for communication. These are standalone entities that may or may not have communications from Clemis. So we would have to create a network to actually communicate whatever information they may want to alert them. So that there needs to be a pipe between IT and the fire hall, where there might not be a pipe today in most cases. Creating networks are very, very expensive. You can do that in a number of ways. You can put up towers on the fire halls. You can run fiber, which is what the Auburn Hills fire chief wanted to do, is run fiber. Fiber could run you $30,000-$40,000 a mile, you know, to connect to those items. And when you get into the north end, you're talking some serious coin, you know, because the north and west, you know, may not be wired at all, you know, for fiber. Remember, most in the north and the west, we have T1s up in that area because the telephone companies made the decision in the past that it didn't make sense for them economically to actually invest in fiber in the north and west. So that doesn't exist. So the dollar amount relating to it is $7 million plus network costs, which we never really pursued. But network costs are very, very expensive. At this juncture, what we committed to in the prior set of discussions is that we would establish a committee comprised of the interested fire departments that might want to deal with the alerting system. That commitment is alive and well. We have 5 committees that will be established as part of this project. A policy committee, which we had before, on how to use the radio system and who uses it in the entire litany. An encryption committee. 2 committees I can't remember because I'm getting old, and the alerting committee. So we have 5 committees that have been established, and we have not done much more than ask people to be party of the committee. We've not held any meetings on any of the 5 committees right now. Our focus today on the radio communication system is really the connectivity between ourselves and the Michigan Public Safety Communication System, or the state system. The state system has all of surrounding the county, and our ability to communicate our state-of-the-art radio system with their Motorola systems that are not state-of-the-art. Unfortunately, they were put in a long time ago, and they're long in the tooth right now. And they're on a different basis generally. We're on TDMA, they're on FDMA. So there's a lot of communication issues on interoperability in the event that our public safety officials get up and are working in a county outside of Oakland, or if they come into Oakland and work. And that communication connectivity needs to be embodied in an agreement. Jody is working on that agreement, but we've had some roadblocks on things such as what they call grade of service. Grade of service for us is 1%, which means 99% of the time when somebody keys up on their radio, they'll get through. The grade of service for the state is 2%. That's not a small issue, because changing grade of service here means you've got additional hardware that you have to have out in the field. And we don't want to go down from 1% to 2%. You know, the public safety folks are expecting grade of service of at least 1%. So there's a lot of things that are in play right now. The alerting system, even if we had the system up and running, would not probably be available for another year and a half. And the most critical piece right now is getting our DDR done, the detailed design review, which is the next step that may modify some of the costs here, which is describing exactly what the Motorola folks are going to guarantee to us in coverage and in services. The very detailed design, going down to the individual towers, going down into each individual PSAPs. And that needs to be nailed down. And that'll impact the cost here, ultimately. And on top of it, you know, the detailed design review will provide the equipment at the time the design review is completed. And remember, we started this a year ago, so there may be upgrades in the system since that point in time, and the equipment that we would actually get at the time that we actually buy the equipment and take possession. So there's a lot going on. Alerting is on the order board. We have a committee that is being formed. We've not met, nor have we met with the other 4 committees.
Okay, very good, thank you.
Other questions? I have a couple questions. So PFM,
PFN,
yes, the
Yeah.
vendor, have they been a good vendor? You know, are they responsive? Are
oh
they
yes, they have been excellent on this effort. And I think that you know, if Mel were here, he'd say that, or Pat Coates, or the IT folks. Very
Okay.
responsive.
Okay, well, that's good to know if we're looking at potentially extending contract. What's the time frame on the DDR?
6 months, by the end of December.
So then we'll have a better cost structure at that point.
Which is
once-
why I said the bonds go out in winter.
Okay, just looking at what's coming and,
Yep.
and,
Yeah, that's the next thing you ought to be looking at, and getting a presentation from somebody here on what does the DDR mean come Christmas.
okay, and who's managing that piece of?
Actually, I would have done that longer term, but I think that Mel Meyer is the head of dispatch for the sheriff's department. And he will be taking up the cudgel here for the project management of this effort. We also have contracted as part of this effort, for technical reasons, Black and Veatch, who have been our contractor through phase 1, 2, and 3 of this effort. And two gentlemen there, Dave L. Will be the project manager during the DDR effort from a technical standpoint in helping Mel, as well as our IT shop as well, and our radio shop. And Dave G. Was there for phase 1, 2, and 3 in the event that we have questions concerning the content of the contract and what it meant and how they responded, because he did much of the evaluation of the Motorola contract and proposal, and helped with the actual negotiations.
Okay, so we have a team of people.
We do, we have a big team.
That's good to know, because this is obviously a very large project, so.
Yes, it is, it's very, and I can guarantee you, it's every bit as much complexity as the financial system that we have, just 4 times bigger.
Other questions about this? Thank you very much.
Okay?
Lynn, would you like to come up? Thanks. Thank you.
Receive and file.
Receive and file. Oh, wait, we did that. We did that.
Okay.
No, I need a voice vote. All those in favor of receiving and filing, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? Motion carries unanimously.
Okay, Holly is passing out a copy of the amendment list. And as I mentioned at the July 24th Finance Committee meeting, we would be bringing forth the, what has been used in the past, the Finance Committee amendment list, which consists of,
We need to have a motion to receive and file. Moved by Commissioner Markham, supported by Commissioner Long. Thank you. I was reminded that. Okay.
so you have a hard copy of the amendment list that I said that we would be bringing forward to you. This represents amendments that have been approved by the Board of Commissioners since the county executive recommendation was brought to the board. So section A of this, page 1 of this document, or the first page of this document, lists all of those resolutions. A1 through A9 are resolutions that were adopted by the Board of Commissioners through the July 18th board meeting. We just received the minutes from July 31st late yesterday, so we have not included those yet. Section B amendments would be any resolution or any adjustments that are being made to positions for the county exec's recommendation for, since the recommendation was provided to the board, Water Resources Commissioner brought forth a position request for a full-time supervisor marketing communications position. They have some partial offsets with a position deletion. That is being funded primarily through their various water and sewer systems. And also the Health Department has a position to create a full-time general fund, general purpose clinical health specialist, and that is being offset by additional Medicaid revenue. So those are listed in section B. Section C of this amendment list includes any additional cleanup or requests that come before the Finance Committee. So we have 4 items at this point. The first 2 deal with the Treasurer's Office, and those are minor amendments to their salary forecast. And if you look at the subsequent pages, each page after that is labeled, it'll say A1, and it'll show the individual detail for those budget amendments that are being placed on this list. So if you refer to the first page of section C, C1, it would show that there's a minor amount of being adjusted for the delinquent personal property tax fund. It's an enterprise fund to the tune of around $3,000. It's adjusting it out of salaries and fringes and adjusting it to professional services. Amendment C2 is also for the Treasurer's Office, deals with the delinquent tax revolving fund, another minor adjustment for salary and fringes for around $1,700. Item C3 on this amendment list is a rather lengthy amendment that is for the Parks and Rec Fund. This is being presented to the Parks and Rec Commission for 2020. It's a reduction of their plan use of balance and is being offset by various line items within their budget for around $764,000. And then the final amendment on this list is Section C4, or Amendment C4. And this relates to the radio communications project that Bob just highlighted. With the funding from the state for the EZNet project, we can reduce the appropriation placeholder that we have in the general fund that was supposed to cover debt service payments. For 2021, we're reducing that by $425,000 out of that $1.6 million, because we do need some funding for the Children's Village and jail radios that Bob explained. And then they're ongoing thereafter, the $1.6 million comes completely out. So with that adjustment, that basically gets the general fund, the long-term projection through 2024, back to the 20% target. So it's about a $5.2 million adjustment, which was about the differential between the forecasted equity position and the target that was presented with the county's budget. So no action is needed today, other than if you want to receive and file. This is usually the amendment list is taken up during the budget wrap-up session scheduled for later this month.
This is a snapshot of where we are presently, and for some of the new members, just to see it, I thought it was worthwhile to be talking about it. Are there any questions about this so far? Commissioner Markham.
Thank you. So the Parks and Rec note under section C, where they didn't spend $764,000, is that what you're telling me?
No, this is for 2020's recommendation.
Oh,
They're
oh.
reducing their budget by $764,000.
My concern with that is one of the issues we had this summer was keeping, I don't know if there's any parks people here, keeping the water parks open because we didn't have lifeguards, and what we're paying lifeguards is not enough to get qualified lifeguards to want the jobs. Because I know lifeguards and asked them, and they said, doesn't pay enough, I can make this right, at the neighborhood pool. Anyway, my concern with the whole thing is that we're not being too conservative. If we're shutting parks down in the summer because we can't staff them because we're not paying enough, that's an issue I think somebody needs to be thinking about. Because we want the parks open in the summer.
We have Parks Commissioners sitting. Okay.
But we did have to stop, we did have to shut them down temporarily for lifeguards. Yeah.
Yeah, a week, the first week or something.
Right, but, I mean, again, we're Oakland County, we have these beautiful parks. Not having lifeguards to me is kind of something that, next year, let's make sure we pay well and have enough lifeguards, that's all.
Are you done? Commissioner McGilvray.
Yeah, the first week we were short lifeguards. We've been that way for the past several summers, actually. I think a lot of the problem is maybe we don't pay enough, number one, but number two, high school kids and kids entering college just don't want to work. I mean, we can't get them to apply for these jobs.
I have two lifeguards who live on my block. One of them's 17, the other one's 18. I walked down the street and said, these are county jobs, do you want them? They said, I make that amount of money at the local swim club, I can ride my bike to. That's an issue. If these are big parks with dangerous pools, I think we should be paying good, strong lifeguards, I think we should just be elevating that, and we're just in a finance meeting, and it's not really, we don't need to go beyond that, but that's my observation.
That certainly is on the radar of the Parks Commissioners. I mean, it's something we need to look at so that we don't have a repeat thing every year trying to find folks to do that job.
Right, thanks.
Other questions or comments? Thank you. All those in favor of receiving and file, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Any other business to come before the Finance Committee today? And thank you for your patience, and we will keep you posted about rescheduling our budget hearings. And we will get the budget passed in a timely basis.